when you look at the Brooklyn Nets at this current moment in time, just take in stock and assess the current state of the Nets and how you see this offseason playing out with them in the next couple of weeks or so.
I mean, I've heard a multitude of takes. I've heard a multitude of different podcasts and analysts, professionals just kind of give their thoughts on Brooklyn, and I've devised kind of my own thought process. And I apologize. I think I have an eyelash in my eye. It's killing me. Uh, I really think that Brooklyn is one of those franchises that is always going to swing for the fences in terms of trying to win right now, as opposed to building something for the future. Kyle made the point. They've done this in the past with KG, Paul Pierce, and they try to make this super team with, Brooke Lopez Young, Chris Humphries, Darren Williams, Joe Johnson, Paul Pierce, and everything. And it didn't work. It was an absolute flop. They traded their entire future for it. They were just starting to get better with youth with the Spencer Dinwiddie, D'Angelo Russell when he got sent to Brooklyn over from the what was it? I think he got sent from the Lakers, right?
In what?
The D'Angelo Russell trade that sent him to Brooklyn. Was it?
Yeah,
Did he go to
yes.
Brooklyn or he went?
Yes, he went to Brooklyn first.
Yeah. So they were starting to acquire younger pieces. Drafted a couple of different people, and then what happens? Immediately again, they have an opportunity to go sign some max players. They let some of their youthful players go. They trade away, or no, they lose Dinwiddie in free agency to Washington, and we all know the history from there. The issue is they gave up their future for James Harden this time, and they gave up a lot for him. Now you're just going to be stuck with Ben Simmons. Patty Mills re-signed. Obviously, you still have Claxton who re-signed. You have Seth Curry who's still there. Joe Harris is coming back from injury. The roster in and of itself is not a bad roster. And whatever it is you get from trading KD and Kyrie, you're going to receive a massive haul in return, which obviously Brooklyn is requesting. They receive either multiple All-Stars and All-Star picks or pick swaps like anybody else would want. So Brooklyn's going to get a lot of good pieces that I think they're still going to be viable in the Eastern Conference. But as an organization, in terms of what they did for this Kevin Durant situation, it's just not a good look. This is the second time you've struck out in literally a decade. You need to chill out and realize, okay, maybe we can't swing for the fences every single opportunity we get for a big time free agent. Kevin Durant is great, Kyrie is great, but it's just an example as to how it could not be great. Things did not pan out the way that you had hoped. And obviously, the big two that you put together didn't play a lot of games together between injury and Kyrie's stances. And then, of course, the big three that didn't even pan out to be a big three. They played less than 20 games together in terms of being at full health and capacity. So it's like you can't seem to get the formula right. You can't seem to win. You haven't gotten out of the second round since this duo has been assimilated, and you just look like a doofus. Like you look kind of corny. Brooklyn looks like an absolute mess. They look like a dumpster fire, and like Kyle alluded to, it really does look like a Cleveland back in the day, a Detroit, a Sacramento kind of destination right now because they just can't seem to get the player personnel correct. And I don't feel bad for the team. I feel bad for the fans because when Kyrie and KD signed, they were excited as they should be, and it ended up not working out, and it ended up not working out in a really really bad way. So Brooklyn's got a lot to think about. They're basically back at the drawing board again, and it's just a matter of what they're going to be able to obtain from trading the two superstars that is Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving.
You know what's kind of funny is when I look at Brooklyn, I look at this from a front office perspective, just kind of like as his first point. If you bring Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant into the fold, I'm not gonna lie. If I was an NBA executive, if I'm in a front office position and I'm wheeling and dealing to get those types of players into our fold and get them on the team, I feel like I've done a pretty good job to be able to retain those types of players. And I'm not gonna lie, when the team initially got Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and then even added James Harden on top of that, I mean, look, that's a hell of a trio to work with. And from a front office perspective, I think Brooklyn was like, we got a squad. And on paper, you'd be hard pressed to say anything otherwise. Because you got Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, James Harden. You basically have 3 of the top 10 players in the NBA on that roster. And yet you pretty much are going to have nothing to show for it. I mean, it's an utter collapse. It's basically an utter embarrassment if this ends up with not only James moving on, but with Kevin and Kyrie possibly getting moved as well. It would just be an utter disaster. But I'm going to be honest, Kev. I can't really blame the front office. I feel like the front office did their job here to be able to bring those guys into the fold. I just don't think that the players and the coaching personnel were able to make it work. It's a chemistry issue, and I think that's really going to be what this whole team is going to possibly collapse on. It's not the front office. It was just the player personnel and the coaching staff. That's what I think is going to be the Achilles heel when we all look back at this, in the next couple of years or so. I mean, when the Nets formed this major super team with Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving, I think even Kevin and I were looking at the situation that Brooklyn would be competing for NBA titles for the foreseeable future because of that trio. Now, granted, the one thing that you kind of have to take into account is if you have three major players that are in the starting five on the roster, the rest of the team is going to be relatively weak when it comes to essentially your bench, essentially some of the role players that you're going to be able to have. And at best, all you're going to be able to do is bring a couple free agents in on some veteran minimum deals and hope for the best. But, I was in the mindset that Brooklyn was going to be able to compete for a title with those three guys in the fold. Obviously, James brought a lot of baggage from his Houston tenure. Obviously, that didn't work out very well. Excuse me, he came from, no, I got that one right. Came from Houston, then went to Philly. Um, Kyrie's a great player. I think we could all see that Kyrie is one of the best players in the NBA when it comes to his overall jump shooting abilities, when it comes to his ability to dribble, his ability to handle. But when it comes to his availability, it's been a point of contention the last couple of years, and it reared its ugly head this past season with the Nets when he missed half of the games because he wasn't able to play home games because of the COVID restrictions that New York set in place when it came to entertainment venues. And then when you look at Kevin Durant, now granted, Kevin Durant was coming off an Achilles tear the last year he was with Golden State. So his injury history has definitely been a point of contention, and he hasn't been healthy the last couple of years on top of the Achilles tear that he had before he went to Brooklyn. Even despite that, I thought that Brooklyn would be able to make this thing work, possibly compete for a title, maybe even two, but it's going to look like it's going to crash and burn within really like 2 or 3 years after this came into its inception. And I mean, to me, when you look at really like, I would say teams that have really gone out of their way to assemble super teams or, teams that have really gone far and beyond to be able to build a championship contending team that is going to try to win here and now. At least some of these teams have been able to succeed. You could look back at 2008 with what the Celtics were able to do with Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen. They joined forces with Paul Pierce. They were able to win a title in 2008. They went back to the finals in 2010. They lost to the Lakers. But in a 3-year stretch, they went to 2 finals and they were competing with the Miami Heat in multiple deep runs into the playoffs. But they had about a 5-year window, but they were able to get 2 finals appearances out of it and got 1 championship out of it. If you look at Miami in 2010, when they were able to bring in LeBron James and Chris Bosh, they joined forces with Dwayne Wade. They went to 4 straight finals. They were able to win 2 of them. You look at Golden State the last couple of years when they had Kevin Durant. He joined forces with Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green, and Andre Iguodala. You could arguably say that's probably one of the best starting fives in NBA history. And they were able to win some titles as well, and were pretty much going to the finals every single year that Durant was on the roster. And then when you look at this super team with James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, they weren't even able to make a finals appearance. And you had 3 of the top 10 players in the NBA to do that, and it just failed miserably. So it's very unfortunate for Brooklyn. I think from the front office perspective, I think they did what they needed to do to bring some championship contending players into the fold. The players and the coaching personnel, they weren't able to lock down the chemistry. They weren't able to lock down the right personnel groupings. They weren't able to play what I would say is effective defense because they were giving up points left and right as a unit. And it looks like, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving could be on their way out within the next couple of weeks or so. Now, granted, that's worst case scenario. But there's a slight chance that Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant could be back in the fold for opening night on this upcoming season. And maybe they just kind of play this thing out and hope for the best. But if the worst case scenario were to happen and Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving get shipped off and they're not with the Nets going into next season, this Brooklyn experiment is just an outright failure. And basically, like right now, they're teetering on just an imminent collapse. And there really is no other way to say it. It's like they're this close, just completely falling apart and becoming literally another black hole in the NBA right alongside teams like the Pistons and the Kings, because those teams are going nowhere anytime soon. And it seems like the way that Brooklyn's on, their trajectory is going to follow very similar to those teams that I just outlined. So, yeah, this is like DEFCON 1 when it comes to the Nets at this point, because things are getting real dicey real fast.